As promised, I'm finally revealing the restrictions to my live stream that'll be starting in about 30 minutes or so, give or take. So for those interested, the link to my Twitch channel is in the description. You guys can head over there, and I'll be up and running at exactly 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And no YouTube order, you're not allowed to watch because you can go fuck yourself. Anyways, both teams have been guessing what restrictions we were going to have, and I must say, they had some pretty accurate guesses as to what the concept was. Now, I said from the beginning this was going to be a team effort and really separate out the teamwork, and I wasn't lying about that, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. But Crota will have a few restrictions in place. The main restriction being, after someone takes the sword and gets all their hits on Crota, they must die. That is right, each sword bearer that runs the sword will have to sacrifice themselves one way or another after their turn with the sword. Whether they let Crota hit them, the boomers, they take a flying leap off a cliff, they rocket themselves to death, whatever it is, each sword bearer will have to sacrifice themselves, and the team must continue on absent one less man after killing Oversoul. And no warlocks, you cannot revive yourself if Crota killed you. You will remain dead for the remainder of that attempt. And the shit doesn't just stop there. If you manage to beat Crota with these restrictions in place on your first try, you know, within 2 or 3 different sword bearers or whatever, then you won't have to worry about the next part. Because if any team has to wipe or they do not beat Crota in their first attempt, I don't want you using the same 3 sword bearers over and over and over again. You will have to use the sword in a rotation. If Crota goes to a second attempt, that means the people that did not use the sword on the first try will now have to use the sword in the next attempt, because your sword bearers will be on a 5-man rotation. So let's use the YouTube team for example, and I'll show you what I mean. They decide San Juan, Brown Power, and Sky will be the first 3 sword bearers in that order. However, we failed to kill Crota for whatever reason. Let's just say on Sky's attempt, shit hit the fan, we couldn't get the job done, sword bearer ran off, whatever the fuck happens. That means Richard and Haymaker will be up next, followed by San Juan, who started off the order. It will always repeat itself with everyone getting a chance at the sword next. Now, if for some reason the sword disappears mid-match, or you need to wipe for any reason before it's your turn, that won't count as a turn with Crota. So let's use this example. Brown is number 2 on the list right now, right? In my example. In his attempt, the sword disappears, or we end up taking a wipe because Crota rotated, whatever the fuck happened. Now, when we go to our next attempt, the very first sword is going to be Brown, since he was the next man up on the sword. He never got an attempt to hit Crota, so his turn is still in play, followed by Sky, and then followed by Richard in my above example. Your turn only counts when you get some hits on Crota. The 5 players will always go in the same order. It cannot be changed. It has to be a constant order. The teams will determine their orders ahead of time, but they have to stick to that order. So if the Prestige Gamers team determines that their order will be Smelly, Hatred, Lethal, Daza, Bite Crazy, then the rotation will always follow that order. No deviation, no changes on the fly. Now, I must say, this is a cruel and evil way to fuck with people. And here's my logic. The reality of the Crota fight is that all you need is 1 decent sword bearer. Because let's be honest here for a moment. If you have 1 person that knows how to use the sword, then the 5 people on rocket duty or boomer duty are basically not doing much. Me, for example, in this speed run, because I restricted myself from communicating and I can't really take the sword, I have the least to be worried about. I'm rarely going to take damage because I won't be in harm's way compared to what a sword bearer is going to have to do, because they assume all the risk. To me, Crota has never been a team effort. It's always been about 1 or 2 people doing the most work, with the others just needing to stay alive and contribute some damage in the main form of Gallahorns or other rockets. This isn't like the Vault of Glass where you need a relic holder, oracle shooters, pillar monkeys to hold the portal open. You need motherfuckers to do certain roles, and Crota is pretty much the exact opposite. So this restriction is the best way in which I can force the extra teamwork into the raid. Now, you need everyone to pull their weight. You need people to know when to shoot, how to use the sword, how to shoot Oversoul. Everything now requires someone to take a certain role. It also makes the job of the rocket firers more important, since they will need to take out Oversoul at least a minimum of 2 times. It's the ultimate challenge for a team to complete. Not just 1 badass player carrying 5 people. Every time I have done Crota, it always comes down to how good is your sword bearer. The fate of 6 players rests in the hands of one person, and I just don't think that's teamwork. It's a one-man show, really, while the other 5 are just waiting on a signal to fire at Crota. There are people who have never used the sword, yet they do Crota hard raids all the time. It's the same way people never picked up the relic in the Vault of Glass unless they were glitching in the Templar fight and shit like that. I want people to experience everything, but you guys get the point. Having one person assume all the risk isn't a team effort. So this restriction is meant to add the teamwork that Bungie couldn't think of on their own. 2 to 3 sword bearers will be needed. Damage on Oversoul will be required, and strategy more than anything will come into play during these runs. Now I'll tell you right now, I thought really long and hard about the restrictions I was going to use against Crota. I thought about having no supers being used, but you know, that would be too easy to get around. Basically, you have someone distract the boomers and your problem solved even if you can't use the bubble and shit like that. Plus, you could bust out the Red Death to regenerate health. So I didn't think that was going to be a good enough restriction. I thought about having us to take out at least one gatekeeper or doing the fight with the horseshoe technique and having to take out the wizards or whatever the fuck. I even considered having the fight take place in one of the towers where the boomers are, just to see if it could be done, but that seemed incredibly extreme. I also even thought about determining the sword bearer order ahead of time by saying whichever order we cross the bridge is the order you're going to have to do the sword, but to me, that wouldn't be fair. The bridge requires one set of strategy rules and Crota requires another. So putting a limit like that just didn't make any sense. Why would I restrict the team's logic based on how they did another section of the game? But in any event, this restriction is going to require teamwork. It's going to require some strategy ahead of time, and I'll tell you right now, because I thought of this way in advance, I already know a few things that are going to trip teams up once they get there. I'm not going to reveal what I know ahead of time. Maybe I'll do it on the live stream. So the people watching are going to know what the fuck they're going to go through, but the teams are just going to have to be able to figure that shit out on their own. I'm sure the teams and people watching right now are thinking about some of the impact this will have on their run, but there is going to be a major oh shit moment when you realize the restriction that I just put in place, and it's going to make people's life incredibly difficult. The teams will have to determine their own sword order and figure out how to attack Crota, dealing with 1 or 2 players missing. But they're also going to have to contend with 2 separate issues that are going to arise from this restriction. They'll see it during the match, and if the Prestige Gamers team watches, they'll see the issue immediately on the first attempt. Now, one of the restrictions that I'm going to lighten up on a bit is that if either team is still struggling at the 1 hour and 45 minute mark, then they can rejoin me in the game chat for the final 15 minutes. If needed, I will even add myself to the rotation of sword bearers, but at that point, they should have the process figured out by now. So that's one concession that I will make in this challenge, is that for the final 15 minutes, I will be able to communicate with the teams that I'm playing with again. I mean, who knows? If we're lucky, both teams will be finished before then, and they won't even need me to talk up in this motherfucker. But I have a feeling this Crota restriction is going to be tripping people up as soon as they get there. And that's also including the fact that I'm going to be host, so all the sword runners are going to experience the Crota glitches where he stands up too early, and probably going to kill a couple of sword bearers who try and go visible from time to time. So that's just another thing that people are going to have to be aware of when they actually do their Crota run. Now, the final thing to note is the reward. Based on the votes of the viewers, you guys decided you wanted to see Crossfire commentary. So the winners of this challenge will get to submit and commentate over videos as their reward, which is going to be some interesting shit. Basically, your reward is embarrassing yourselves on my channel. It's fucking brilliant. You gotta admit that. I don't even have to do the work. Basically, you guys do all the work, and I get to sit back and laugh at your asses. So anyway, live stream is starting in 30 minutes, so you guys are more than welcome to come watch. The link is in the description to my Twitch channel. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys during the live stream.